Alright, I went ahead and removed the hood and the fenders and the seat. Then you want to remove your tank. There's 2 bolts in the back, 2 bolts in the front, and then you have your fuel line here on top and the fuel pump connector right here on top as well. Fuel pump one, you just basically push down on the back and then the clip should slide right off. So after you've disconnected the electrical connector for the fuel pump, you just want to disconnect the fuel line, squeeze the sides and pull back. A little bit of gas might come out. Once you have the electrical connector and the fuel line disconnected, you have all 4 of the bolts. You can go ahead and pull the tank right off. Under the fuel tank, you're going to find a little plastic protector. You can just go ahead and pull that right out. It's not screwed down. After you take the gas tank off, we're going to remove the cover for the intake valves, and then we're going to remove the cover for the exhaust valves, and we're also going to remove the caps on this side so that we can set it at top dead center. A 16mm long socket, 16mm long socket to get the spark plug off. And that's a CR8E spark plug, NGK CR8E spark plug. So once you get the cam cover off, you just want to make sure this little mark right here, you're going to turn the engine over until that mark lines up with this little mark right here. So they're pretty close right now. It looks like it needs to be turned over just a little bit more before that will line up perfectly with that. And then also down below, the little timing window. So I'm just giving you guys a look at the exhaust valves now. And as I'm turning this breaker bar, it's turning the engine over. And the mark that I'm looking at on my side, you can't really see it, but it's just now reaching top dead center right now. And the distance we'll be measuring is between the adjuster here, the bottom of the adjuster, and the top of this plate right here that sits on top of the spring. And underneath that is the rod that goes down, pushes into your valves, that opens and closes it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to turn the engine over until it's at top dead center, and at that point we'll measure the distance between the adjusters and that plate that sits on top of the valves. So I'm just adjusting it again now, lining up the marks over on this side, and as I get to right about there, you can see that's the spot we need to be at to check our valves. And when those marks are all aligned, then you're ready to go up on top and stick your feeler gauge in between the top of the valve there and the bottom of the adjuster. And if they're out, what you do, if they're out of specification, is you're going to loosen this nut right here, and then you're going to turn the end of the little adjuster there. This is threaded, and that moves this little rod up and down inside. You can see right now there's just a tiny bit of play, just like. We're going to use the feeler gauge right now to make sure that it's perfectly in spec, and if it's not, then we'll adjust this little nut right here for all of the exhaust and intake valves. So I went and picked up this feeler gauge down at O'Reilly, the local parts store, and it's about $10. And you can see this one right here is 0.18 millimeter. So that's the one I'm going to start with. Then I'm going to check 0.20 millimeter, and those should both fit. Those are all within spec. This is the last one that's within spec, and then the 0.23 should not fit. Slight resistance, but not be too tight. So this one should not fit. Anything larger than that, and we are way out of spec, and it needs to be tightened and adjusted. These two, as long as they fit in there relatively snug, not too tight, then we're within spec. So that's too much. These are within spec, 0.18, 0.20, and then this is over spec, 0.23. So let's go ahead and just see if the 0.18 millimeter will fit in first. So I can tell that it's relatively tight, even with just the 0.18. I'm going to go ahead and move up to the 0.20 now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try the 0.20 now, and then I'll try the 0.23 after that. And the 0.23 should not fit. The 0.20 should be pretty snug. The 0.18 was already snug, so I imagine this 0.20 will be even more snug. Okay, so I'm not able to get the 0.20 millimeter feeler in there. They're tight enough that the 0.18 millimeter feeler slid in perfectly, very snug. It lifted up just slightly, but it did go in. And the 0.20 millimeter does not want to enter. So I think that we're within spec on the exhaust valves, and I'll go ahead and just go over to the other side now, and we'll check the intake valves as well, and hopefully they're within spec as well. Alright, so the intake valves are a little bit trickier to get to. They're kind of down in at an angle. I did see some angled feeler gauges at the store, but unfortunately they didn't have the thinner type style that you need. So the intake side, the tolerances are a lot smaller. It's a lot closer spec to measure. You'll need one that has between 0.09 and 0.13 millimeter. So you don't want to go any bigger than 0.13 millimeter, which, so when you're looking at these, you're talking about a very fine adjustment, very small, it's very thin. I mean, you're talking about basically the width of a piece of paper. And we're going to be measuring, again, it's between 0.09 millimeter and 0.13 millimeter. Very, very small, tiny gap between the adjuster and the top of the valve there. So I'm just going to go ahead and check the top of the valves. Since we want it to be within 0.9 and 0.13, I'll go ahead and start. I've got a 0.10 millimeter that's within spec. So that should fit in there fairly easy. Can only get my 0.10 millimeter feeler in there about halfway, and then it binds up, so that won't even actually fit in there. Okay, so since the intake valves are a little too tight, we're going to go ahead and loosen them up to the largest specification. So we're going to go ahead and adjust the intakes. The intakes are just a little too tight. I can barely fit the smaller feeler gauge in there, so we're going to go ahead and raise them up. We're going to open up the gap to 0.13 millimeter. Now that I have both of the 10 millimeter lock nuts loose, we can adjust the actual valve itself. You're just going to take the top here where it's square and grab that with some pliers. There's a Yamaha tool specifically for adjusting these tappets, but I don't have that. I'm just going to go ahead and use a set of these old pliers that I have. They have kind of a flat nose on the end. And we're just going to basically make a quarter turn to the left, counterclockwise, which will raise the gap below this and the top of the valve there. Okay, so now that I've raised the adjustments a quarter turn, I'm just going to take another measurement, make sure I haven't gone too far. Stick my 0.13 in there. And now the 0.13 fits in very easily. Again, the 0.13 fits in both sides very easily. This left side feels just a tad bit more open than the other one, so I'm going to go back just like 1/8 of a turn to the right, clockwise now, to tighten it again. Now there's just a little bit of friction on that side, and a little bit of friction on this side as well. So to tighten these back down and secure them in the position we've got now, we're just going to hold the top, and then we're going to tighten down the lock nut. Alright, with the adjusters all locked down, I'm just going to take one more measurement and make sure that I didn't budge them while I was tightening them down. Left side feels good. There's just a slight resistance when I slide the feeler in. Nice and smooth. Alright, you can see that both sides fit just about perfectly now with the 0.13 millimeter. And now both sides have been fit just about perfect.
Trail Blogger.